All right, hey everybody, it's Fire for Effect, episode 4. We got myself, John Jones, and Marcus Moyer. I'm Jim McBride. It's good to see y'all. Fortunately, we don't have Pastor Mike with us today, but we have him as a great resource of knowledge and faith and experience, and we have some other guys that you haven't met yet that we'll introduce you here in a few weeks. And I think I want to speak for you guys, but I'm pretty sure you each have guest people we can interview down the road. I know I have a whole lot of folks that would be very, very interesting, but I want to get our technical stuff worked out here and get this smoothed out a little bit before we start interviewing folks.
Glad to be here. It's a good overcast Friday.
Thanks, Sean.
I always enjoy meeting up with you guys. It's a nice sunny day here in Northern Virginia. John, you can keep all that cloudy, nasty weather down in North Carolina. We don't want it up here.
Hey, we'll take it. It's a little relief from the heat right now.
Yes. Yeah. I like the whole East Coast right now. It's cooled off a little bit from last few weeks. It was brutal. Little reprieve before the dog days of August start kicking in again. So I want to talk about and just kind of reintroduce a little bit of our background. Several of us, two of us here, but several of us in our group have military backgrounds, mostly Marine Corps, one Navy. And just with AI being it's just taken off like wildfire ever since ChatGPT broke the mold probably a couple years ago now. And of course, a lot of other AI followed with Grok, with Elon Musk's X, and Claude is a popular one apparently. But when I was at the Pentagon before I retired in 2021, one of the things that I remember reading about, all unclassified, open source, is China's always looking for, wants to be a competitor with us, with the U.S., wants to be prepared in case a military conflict happens, that they're able to assert their will where they want to do it, like just say Taiwan, for example, or whatever, and wants to be able to, prevent the U.S. from asserting our will and our interests. But they know that the U.S., has decades of fighting very complex missions and conflicts. It's well known that China and Russia both were astounded and blown away at the Gulf War, 100-day Gulf War in 1991 that the U.S. executed in Iraq, and they studied that conflict and how exceptionally well the U.S. did that against, at the time, the fourth largest army in the world, I believe, was the Iraqi army. And they folded pretty quick. And one of the ways that we are effective as U.S. fighters is our command and control and combined arms and all this other stuff, but really our command and control with our communication and the way the U.S. military, I think the Marines does it the best, but the Army also fights with a general theory of decentralized command and control, with mission type orders, and that doesn't work well if you don't have a good command and control system and training and all that stuff. And the system part of it is communications and being able the commanders on the ground being able to make rapid decisions without having necessarily to reach back for guidance every step of the way. So anyway, we have years and years of doing that. In the Navy, if our sailor counterpart was with us, he'd talk about how the Navy is very proud of its command and control, from at sea, with huge fleets, communicating on land and everywhere else, and we're just unmatched. We've been unmatched at that with any nation in the world for decades. So China knows this. They're not stupid. They know that that's a huge advantage that we've had. So they've been investing in, and they've had this theory before ChatGPT came out for years, of using AI as an asymmetric advantage, developing AI. And I remember when I was in 2021, when I was hearing about this, I was like, that's kind of a pipe dream. It's nice to say that. And I was kind of a little bit intimidated because China, they've been growing in their stature and their technology and um, capabilities for quite a while. And, there's always the fear they could catch up to the United States. But I thought, yeah, but, computers standing in for all that human experience and human training and human technology enabling human decisions, they're not going to be able to make up with that with computers, is what I remember thinking at the time. Fast forward to now, of course, ChatGPT comes out, and AI is getting exponentially more capable and powerful every few months. It's pretty astounding. Give you a quick example, something I just did that you guys are both like this, I think. I think we're all fans of U.S. Constitution, Declaration of Independence, Federalist Papers. I personally am lazy reading that stuff and studying it. And part of it is the language, especially the Federalist Papers. It's the language they spoke at the time is kind of cumbersome, and if you're not used to writing, let's like if you read Shakespeare for the first time, it's really hard for your mind to wrap around that style of language unless you read it a lot. So there's some friends here in Charleston that are trying to teach the Constitution to folks and get more people knowledgeable about it, particularly elected officials, including elected officials. And I had this idea the other day to try to put in, I use Grok. Use Grok to put in Federalist Paper number 1, into Grok and reproduce it in the style of Ernest Hemingway. And if you've read Ernest Hemingway, he's unique amongst famous prolific authors because unlike many famous prolific authors that have run-on sentences and really descriptive flowery words and that kind of stuff, Ernest Hemingway was known for being blunt and succinct and still being very effective. And it reproduced Federalist Papers number 1 in a very readable, short, succinct, like just get to the point, like what are you trying to say style. And I shared it with this guy who's trying to teach Constitution stuff to folks, and he loved it. He's like, wow, this is so much more understandable than the original Federalist Papers number 1. Anyway, just an example of how powerful AI is and how fast it's modifying itself. So after my long opening monologue here, I'll stop and let you guys talk here. But with AI, I now believe that it can and will inevitably become decision makers on the battlefield. And of course, the analogy that most people think of as Skynet, in Terminator. That's the next level. I think Skynet. If you think Terminator, that Skynet kind of takes over and is running the show completely with, it seems like, without intervention. One step before that is human intervention, but using AI to make decisions on the battlefield, when to strike an enemy, where to strike an enemy, with what weapons, with what platforms, because it will decide that way faster than a human can do it, and with way more information than a human can possibly have. So the temptation is going to be inevitable. It's going to happen. And as a forward air controller in the Marines, we're taught rules of engagement. For example, in Afghanistan in 2004, 2005 timeframe, I was in Afghanistan as a forward air controller with the grunts, and we were, ad nauseum taught what the rules of engagement were in Afghanistan. And it was, we can fire on a person, a target, if it had hostile act, hostile intent, or likely imminent threat. So if the person or people had were committing a hostile act, firing a weapon, for example, hostile intent, they had a AK-47, or really if they had an RPG on them. A farmer doesn't walk around with an RPG. If you have an RPG, you have a hostile intent or a likely imminent threat if they're setting up for an ambush or whatever. Those are examples. And so that was beat into us ad nauseum. And all these, lawyers come up with this kind of stuff to kind of simplify it. And as long as you're within those rules of engagement and you attack the enemy or counterattack the enemy or whatever, you're safe from a legal standpoint. If you go outside those rules of engagement and somebody dies, you're in trouble. Well, now, in my opinion, with AI, even if you kind of program into into AI rules of engagement, we already know it's already thinking on its own and modifying the rules and regulations that people are programming into it. So conflicts in the future, literally from today on forward, I think will be overtaken by AI. And here's my ultimate concern, then I'll stop talking. My ultimate concern is, yes, of course, what will AI do? Who will they target? How will they target it? Will it be within the parameters of human defined parameters based on rules of engagement? But when it doesn't, when it makes it, let's say it's a mistake, or it just decides on its own to make up its own rules of engagement, who's accountable? Who's held accountable? Because right now, if something happens in the military, if anyone makes a mistake and kills the wrong person, or God forbid, has blue on blue fratricide, kills your own folks, drops a bomb and you hurt your own folks or kill your own folks, or you hurt some innocent civilians, someone is usually held accountable. There's a criminal case, investigations. They look into the incident, and then someone's held accountable. It could be PFC, a lance corporal, a general officer, lieutenant colonel, whatever. Someone should be held accountable anyway. With AI, who do you hold accountable? There's 1,000 programmers and 100 people putting in different algorithms, and there's the accountability starts going out the window. And I think that just opening the topic with the military aspect of it, because it makes sense to me, but this could also come into play in many other aspects of our lives as the AI starts doing more and more. And I guess my point ultimately is that who do you hold accountable? You can't punish Elon Musk if Grok says or does something. Maybe you could try, but same with ChatGPT. It's taken on a life of its own, and I think that has a lot of moral implications that we are not even close to being able to know how to grapple with. I'll stop there. What do you guys think?
First, it's a fascinating topic, and it's certainly in public consciousness and in the public debate at the moment. And as you were talking, especially there at the end, it reminded me of the conversation that often surrounds gun control, where people want to hold gun manufacturers accountable for bad things that are done with guns. And I think those are not the same thing. And over to you, gentlemen, on what you think about this, because in that case, the manufacturer just made the weapon. He's not responsible for what the weapon did. AI, on the other hand, what that weapon system does under the control of AI is programmed by the manufacturer. So unlike a conventional weapon, the manufacturer is responsible for what the weapon does and the decision it makes. Do you think there's a valid difference there in terms of being able to hold one manufacturer accountable versus the other one? To what degree do you separate the person who wrote the program from the consequences of what the program does?
Yeah, I think this one distinction with the gun manufacturer analogy is that, and this, I'm a big defender of individual rights. We lost John. You still there with us, John, or we just lose your video? Is that a gun manufacturer? They create a tool. They create a tool. I mean, just to take it even further, a knife manufacturer. They make knives, and the knife doesn't kill people. The person uses the knife to do whatever they do with it. It could be killing somebody, unfortunately, or it could be carving up a steak or whatever. Same thing with a gun. I think that the gun is more capable of deadly force, but it's still in my mind in the hands of the person who has the gun and how they use it, and they're held accountable. I think that's how it should be, not the manufacturer. Whereas AI can potentially pull the trigger itself and make the decision itself, and that's what I think. Because just real quick, just short, if AI was more controlled and we didn't use it to pull the trigger, and technically that hasn't happened yet on the battlefield, as far as we know. It may be right now in Ukraine, for example. It may be happening. I don't know. We don't know that for sure. So if AI was restrained from doing that, I think it's a great tool to coalesce information, make complicated decisions, as long as you can work out those hallucinations that they have and all that stuff that you're hearing about. But if the person made the decision to pull the trigger, then I think that's a good tool. But I think what's going to happen is because I don't think like people like China or Russia are going to restrain themselves that way. So, and I haven't heard the U.S. talking about really concerned about on the government side of things restraining itself either. I'm not saying that they've said either way, but um, if you know that AI has a decision OODA loop, reserve orient decide act OODA loop that's infinitely faster than a human OODA loop, I think the temptation is going to be overwhelming that the military that's running that AI, using that AI, is going to use it to make decisions. And if we restrain ourselves, the U.S. does for moral concerns, but our opponent does not restrain itself, I think the fear would be that will be an overwhelming disadvantage. And I don't know the answer to prevent this from spiraling out of control.
Yeah. I would have to correct the imprecision of my previous statement when I talked about a conventional weapon. You know, the manufacturer produces it, but he's not responsible for what it does. Obviously, the purpose of the weapon itself, the manufacturer builds the weapon to serve that functional purpose. So in that regard, he is responsible for what the weapon does because that's the weapon's purpose, but not the choices that are made with the weapon. In terms of where and how and upon whom to apply the purpose or functionality of the weapon, as opposed to AI, which does make those choices. To your point, and I think another kind of frightening aspect of it is that because computers are so advanced and the AI is so good at a lot of what it does, even when it makes the wrong choice, the quote unquote wrong choice, and maybe chooses to kill the wrong person. Do you think people will not even acknowledge that that was the wrong choice? But because the computer made it, it must have been the right one, which is almost even more frightening.
I think that will be a default because, the computer's so much smarter. It's taking in so much more information. It must know. So I think it'll be a higher threshold to like, it's already, we've already seen it. It's already a high threshold to hold our own human military commanders to task when an innocent person's killed. Or let's see what happened. I think it was around the withdrawal from Afghanistan. We did a counterattack. Remember, a few weeks later, I think, somewhere in Afghanistan or something, that car of innocent people was killed. Remember that? And that was Central Command, I think, making that decision, if not mistaken. I think the New York Times picked up on that article and published something kind of scathing about it, but no one was held accountable as far as being fired or anything that we know of, and that's what led to what's the Marine major's name?
Schiller?
Schiller, yeah, and he's now high up, I think, on the chain of command at the Pentagon somewhere now. But he put his career on the line. He was a rock star, I think he was at infantry officer course or somewhere as a commander, and which is you're going places if you got that role. And he called out the lack of accountability for both the Afghanistan withdrawal and that strike afterwards. And lost my train of thought on this one, but just even with that, even when there is a human that can be held accountable, we tend to, for some reason, not want to hold humans accountable. So now you put AI in the mix, like, well, they know so much more than humans do, so clearly they're making the right decision. So I think there will be obvious cases that I would assume like that, like a mistake will be made, that will break through that pro AI bias, but it's going to be much more rare, if that makes sense. And and even if it does break through, like, okay, that's clearly a mistake. It's a building full of it's an orphanage or something that was destroyed, um, and not like in a Hamas situation where they use civilian places as human shields. Something that's very cut and dry, black and white. It would have to be so clear and evident, and then someone be able to witness it, to call out AI in that case. But then what do you do? Like, again, they already have now all these hallucinations that AI is having, and they don't even know how it's happening. There's stories of AI reprogramming itself and making copies of itself without human direction to do so, in order so it can survive as a self-protection mechanism. I mean, it's already like getting out of control. So I just don't. That's why I'm bringing it up. It's such a morally troubling path we're going down, and I don't know an answer to how to prevent it or solve it.
Well, we're still on like the very like we're on the precipice of all that AI promises to be able to deliver. And so we're really dealing with something that we can't possibly fathom or understand at the moment. There's only a handful of people, I think, in the world who have any true appreciation of what we're dealing with here. People like Elon Musk, and he's done a lot of interviews. I'm sure you've listened to him, just like I have, where he obviously is not anti-AI because he's heavily involved in its creation, but he definitely perceives the risks and the dangers involved with it. But to this conversation that we're talking about, being as early on in this game as we are, it would, for this application at least, in my mind, as you know, in every kill chain, there's eventually one person who decides whether you pull the trigger or you don't. And I think it has to stay that way, and it can't be turned over to a computer. And you mentioned the OODA loop. AI is super fast with that, and as you know, the part of the OODA loop that takes the most time is the orienting and observing. Orient, observe, decide, and act. Making the decision and acting usually doesn't take too long if you've got the right information that's synthesized in the correct way, and you can make an informed choice. And it seems to me that AI is perfect for that. Speeding up the first half of the OODA loop, and then presenting to the trigger puller or to the commander, here's what the intel suggests, and maybe even, here are your options, and maybe even here's what AI would recommend. But it still has to be the human being that makes the decision. I think that's the only way to keep accountability squarely where it needs to be, and to hold people accountable.
Yeah. And what I guess my concern, what if China, like, we go to war, China invades Taiwan, we want to defend Taiwan, get into conflict with them. What if they don't hold themselves back to that, what's the word I'm looking for? Just that restraint.
Yeah.
So if they don't do it, then the rest of the OODA loop for them is faster. So therefore the OODA loop's faster. And we hold ourselves back. Do you think that we would be able to still be effective combat-wise, and also resist the temptation to, like, oh man, they're obviously letting AI make decisions and pull the trigger, so we need to do it too, or we're going to lose this conflict. You know what I mean?
Probably, but I think we already operate at a disadvantage, because we're still talking about ethics here, just a different version of it. And the ethics of warfare have always been, I don't want to call it a limitation because that sounds bad, but it does slow down and limit what somebody with morals and ethics is willing to do, even though maybe crossing those would, maybe at least in the short term, prevent a quicker and better outcome. Torture is an example. I need information and I need it now, and I can get it from this guy, but he's not talking. And of course, as Americans, at least on paper, we don't do that. Whereas our enemies have no such compunction, and they're willing to do all kinds of things to get an advantage on us. So we already sort of put ourselves at a disadvantage in that way. similar but different than the AI conversation. But yeah, I think anytime we try to impose rules on ourselves that our enemies don't, it's going to put us at a disadvantage. But I think you have to, because the danger in not doing so, you become the enemy that you're trying to defeat. And if I forget who it was that said it, but if you have, your goal is always to get back to a peaceful situation. And if the way in which you win the war endangers the future peace, then you really haven't won.
That's a great point. You're right. We have historically and traditionally been or tried to be the moral actor in a conflict when it does make it harder for us to fight on at the moment. But we believe, again, traditionally, historically, we believe that the moral component does have a long-term effect. Um, I think even in the conflict itself, as well as just, well, I know you and I, we're big believers in the values of the Declaration of Independence and the Judeo-Christian values and things like that that make America what it is. And making America what it is powerful, because if there's a moral component to power, power by in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. You take away the moral component, now power is a bad thing. And that's what has made, or what we strive to be. We're never perfect, of course, but that's what we strive as Americans to be in America. Strive to be, to have that reputation, a truthful reputation of being the moral actor. And again, we have not been perfect throughout history, but generally speaking, how we fought World War II and other conflicts, Geneva Conventions and all that, we try to adhere to that even when our enemies do not, our opponents do not. So that's a good point. That it gives me hope that maybe that we will have the same mindset with this AI coming in. And frankly, I haven't heard anyone talking much about it. That's kind of why I want to bring this topic up. Like I've heard about, like you said, Musk talks often about the ethical and moral concerns for AI down the road, especially if it kind of takes off on its own, like a Skynet type of thing. But I haven't heard anyone talking about it from the military standpoint and making decisions yet. Hopefully, those discussions are happening, and maybe this discussion will lead to people to have this discussion more often. I don't know, but yeah, I hope you're right. I hope we hold on to those traditional American values and how when we have to fight a conflict or we get in a conflict, we adhere to those moral traditional standards that we've tried to adhere to throughout our history, and believe that we can still win. Believe that, like you said, that's really good to break it down to OODA loop that way. That the first two, observe, orient, AI can absolutely help speed that up, exponentially, and then decide. And maybe it can even have a decision role, give some options, for example, for them to act, to pull the trigger, to make the decision to pull the trigger, can be the human element that we insist on holding on to at the chain of command level, the human level. Even though that might slow down, it will slow down the OODA loop, but we'll be making decisions that, number one, here's the other thing too. Like if we don't even know, if AI is just out there killing bad guys on the battlefield, it could happen so fast that we don't even know. Commanders don't even know what's happening. They don't even know who's getting, killed or shot at or whatever. But if the chain of command is always involved in the decision-making process, then at least somebody in that chain of command knows what's happening on the battlefield and is, again, making the decision and being hopefully held accountable, so that, because I'm sure, even though AI is almost infinitely more intelligent, or will be at the observe and orient side of things, it's going to make mistakes, because it's looking at, just like humans make mistakes, but it's going to make mistakes that, I think, no matter how advanced AI gets, it's never going to be human. And humans have a certain type of perception of things that computers, I think, will never fully replicate. including that intuitive sense that humans get sometimes, the hair on the back of your neck, like, just something doesn't feel right about this. All the data in front of me looks like I should pull the trigger, or should tell Corporal so-and-so to pull the trigger. Something doesn't feel right about this. That AI will never have, and that commander's got to make a decision whether to yes, pull the trigger or not. So I'm going on too long here, but I hope you're right. I hope that we adhere to that principle that we've tried to hold on to for generations and through conflicts, to be the morally superior actor in a conflict. And again, a lot of people will argue, pick your battle, Vietnam gets criticized a lot, certain battles in Vietnam, things like that. We've never been perfect, never will be, but I think traditionally we've tried to be the moral actor in a conflict, and even when we don't uphold those standards the way we want to in hindsight, we should always strive towards doing that. I think that does set us apart from a lot of our enemies in the past and potential enemies in the future. So hopefully you're right. Hopefully we'll hold on to that. And I hope that this discussion starts proliferating in the Pentagon and in the the current and future administrations. Because if we don't talk about it, and if our leaders aren't talking about it, or if it's not taught in the academies, I hope it's by now being taught in the academies. That'd be a good litmus test to see if the Navy War College and Marine Corps War College, all that stuff, Army War College, command and staff universities were talking about this kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, if we do hang on to that, as you said, it will only be because these types of things find its way into legislation, into the law of land warfare, and into the rules of engagement. And if you think about it, the law of land warfare and rules of engagement exist to prevent people from doing what comes naturally in the heat of the moment. That's what rules of engagement do. Because when you, in a combat situation, when your life is threatened, there are certain things that you are biologically prone to do. And it's not always the right or moral thing. It's just a survival instinct. And rules of engagement exist and are beaten into us, as you said, from your time as a forward air controller, to hopefully train out of you the thing that's going to come naturally that is not the right and moral thing to do. And so while it may be counterintuitive to insert a human being into this OODA loop that AI is so much faster and at least more capable in terms of processing information, doesn't seem like the intuitive and beneficial thing to do. Rules of engagement exist for exactly that purpose. Not to do the convenient thing, but to help us do the right thing.
Good point.
And obviously a less lethal example, and you and I both spent a lot of time in the Pentagon, and we deal with collecting information and then presenting courses of action to leadership who then make decisions based on that information. And we get it from all different sources and different databases and data streams. Your experience is probably like mine. I spend probably 80% of my time collecting the information, synthesizing it in a way that makes sense, that is useful for a decision-making purpose. And maybe only 10-15% of the time is spent actually analyzing the information and making a decision about it. We spend the vast majority of our time just collecting it and getting it into a format that is analyzable. And AI can absolutely flip that ratio, where we spend 15 or 20% of our time collecting the information and 80% of our time analyzing and making a good decision based on it.
That's really great. Yeah, that's really the whole mission planning process, whether it's R2B2, which is rapid response planning process, or which is what Marine Expeditionary Units use, which is a shortened version of the military, the joint planning process, and the Marine Corps planning process, Army planning process, which is mission analysis. All right, is that the first step?
Problem framing, right? Problem framing. No, it is mission framing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mission analysis, problem framing
aspect is the most time consuming and most important, in my opinion, part of it, because like you said, you have to analyze the situation, the terrain, the enemies, the friendlies, the non-combatants, the weather, like all these things. If you don't get the history, the context, if you don't get all that right, you're you you're already on the wrong track as far as what your mission is supposed to be, and the parameters to engage and execute that mission. And that was, I really was heavily impressed on the importance of that, of mission analysis. I was on 2 Marine Expeditionary Units, and as well as just in the Marine Corps, just the mindset is to you got to get that part right, and it did take the most time. And our S2, the intelligence components were that's the job was constantly 24/7, literally doing mission analysis, so that they could bring that analysis into a mission planning process. Because if they weren't doing it 24/7, no one else had the time to do it, really. And if you just kind of see a situation in a snapshot of time and try to do a mission based on that, you're missing the boat potentially. So really good point about how AI can do that now and really enhance. So should still be obviously in S2 doing that as well, but enhanced by AI. My goodness gracious, it'll make the mission analysis aspect so much more effective and more meaningful, and the important aspects teased out much more effectively to go into a mission planning process. So that, like you said, you can make, what's the part you said, the 80% will be more the...
Yeah, we spend only 20% of our time now with AI's help collecting and synthesizing information, and the majority of our time is now spent analyzing and making good decisions based off of it. Because right now it's the opposite.
That's good.
And AI is such a cool tool with such limitless possibilities, and the potential and the temptation to misuse it is going to be huge, just like any other technology. And in order to curtail that, it's going to require, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I don't like excessive government regulation, but there are areas where it definitely needs to be applied, and this is one of them. In order to keep it in a box where it should be, it's going to require intervention by our legislatures, and it's going to have to be intelligent intervention. And you watch some of our members of Congress, I'm not real comfortable with some of them making decisions on things like this. As we've talked about this, it reminded me, if you rewind 60 some years, and in the 1950s, 1960s, there was another technological race, but it was the space race, right? We're I think on the precipice of a similar race. And President Trump has already acknowledged this, and he's declared that America is going to win the AI race, and we're going to be the AI capital of the world. And he's, making moves in order to make that happen. But back in the 60s, when it was the space race, and all of these leaps and bounds were being made in technology, everything from, commercial air travel to space travel to television, communications advances. Dr. Martin Luther King, again, very prescient individual in a lot of ways. He commented on that, where he was saying, we live in this incredible time and period in history where we've been able, through our technological advances, to put time in chains. He said, where you can eat breakfast in New York and dinner in London, and we have all of these advances in communications. And he said that unfortunately the means by which we live have outpaced the means for which we live. In other words, our morals are not keeping up with our technology. And I think that's absolutely true in the case of AI as well.
Boy,
we've got this tremendous thing. Yeah. And if you ever listen to Coffee with Scott Adams, he has a podcast. Yeah. So Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, he always gives updates on AI in each of his podcasts. It's something that he tracks and monitors.
Interesting.
And one of the things that we've decided to do with AI is build sex toys with them, and use it for that. And you got this powerful tool, and that's the way human beings choose to use it. Clearly, our morals are not keeping up with our technology,
Right.
and the potential for misuse is there unless curbed. And Ray Bradbury, if you're familiar with him, an author, he wrote a lot of futuristic stuff, and he made the point that he said, "I don't think the robots are taking over." He said, "I think the men who play with toys have taken over. And if we don't take the toys out of their hands, we're fools," he says. And so AI is a toy of sorts, a very dangerous toy. But if the adults don't put limitations on how the toy is used, then we all become essentially slaves to the programmers. And over time, people forget how to think. You see this in schools already, where kids are using AI to write their papers.
Yeah.
And eventually, we just have unquestioned trust in whatever the computer says, whatever the computer does, which is essentially just putting unquestioned trust in the people who write the programs that tell the computers what to think and do.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and it as we've seen stories about how it gets things wrong, and it like if it'll reference studies that never happened. You've seen that before, like it'll or law cases that never happened. Like it makes them up with a lot of correct ones and then a fake one here and there, and decisions are being made in courts and stuff like by lawyers and scientists, and it's just
So it's very human in that way, that it's willing to lie in order to bolster its own credibility.
Yeah, and I just saw I think I saw this in a podcast yesterday or something. Someone bringing up how it's also being able to create these images and videos, and they think it'll start being able to make a movie from scratch with no humans involved that looks as real as if human actors were acting in it. Within few years, it'll be able, like a couple years probably, it'll be able to do that. And it's so completely fake images and people that don't exist and didn't happen. So the deepfake thing is obviously much more dangerous now, and it's going to get to the point potentially that if we don't find a way to prevent this from happening, and we're already seeing it on Facebook and social media, AI generated content that's completely made up, but it looks real. It's going to distort reality in general. Now, moving completely away from the military conflict aspect of things, just our everyday reality so much that it's going to more and more cloud. And that's already been kind of happening especially since COVID, happened, like all this, what's true, what's not true, what the government's telling us true or not true. And the government has authority. It's like, oh, well, they must know what to do here, to wear the masks or to have a 6 feet distance or whatever. Turns out all that was bogus. And but those were humans doing that. Now you're going to have computers and AI doing it on a rapid, massive scale, scaled up like almost infinitely. And it's going to cloud reality so much that if people aren't grounded with a basic set of core value system to fall back on, our society could just kind of, I don't know how to describe it. I think you know what I'm trying to describe here, but our society is going to lose its moorings, lose its anchors, and I'll come back again to kind of one of our themes. We believe in obviously the Bible and Christianity, and in the Declaration of Independence and the values incorporated in the Declaration of Independence, and that's what is the kind of the core, the foundation of America. That is a value that we hold on to, that we use to argue for things that are happening in America. If things are getting off kilter, it's off kilter based on what? Well, based on a set core set of values that we believe in, that are, again, espousing the Declaration of Independence, Constitution of the United States, etc. And those arguments are healthy. In free speech, you argue where there's gray areas or different interpretations. That's healthy to have this free speech and talk about it. But at least you have a foundation to start with, a sense of reality to start with. And with AI and everything being fake, our younger generation especially is going to, the fear is to lose its sense of what reality is, some kind of base foundation with which to argue from, or with which to get life back based onto that foundation, or that anvil, that anchor. I don't know if I'm describing this well, but it's like if we don't find out what that value, that core set of values is, and in America, I think we also agree. 1 second here, sorry. I think we agree that there's the traditional American founding fathers' American values, and there's these ebbs and flows throughout history of kind of a socialist view of how life should be in America, even Marxist influences, and that's based on a value system, a different value system than the founding fathers. And as long as the people know where they're arguing from, let's talk about it. Let's have free speech. Let's argue it, and let's let the best argument win, so to speak. But when you have AI just making things up out of whole cloth and making up a reality out of whole cloth, see my point? Like that's a concern that again, it's similar, I guess, in a way to the military side of things, but just in life in general, that it can really cause. Ever since COVID, we've really fractured as a society, partly because we're all in our homes, we couldn't interact, and we weren't meeting at the coffee shop anymore, and it led to a lot of remote work, obviously, which I kind of like remote work, but that led to less interactions, and it just kind of, and then people are already kind of tribal by nature, and we tend to stovepipe what we believe, and our social media algorithms are feeding us what we already believe in, not challenging our thoughts much. And now you throw in AI that's just making things up and making up concepts and people and events. It really worries me how society's going to go down this road if we don't get back to our moral beliefs and foundations, which I think is why the church has a huge role to help society out here by really being true to what it believes, what the Bible says. And that is happening, like we've seen, like the younger generation, Gen Z, especially the male population in Gen Z, is turning back to church and back to faith more than any generation in recent history.
Yeah,
and I guess so that's the very reason we're probably talking about. These kids grew up through the COVID era and the lockdowns and school shut down and all this. Like, this doesn't make any sense, and it turns out it didn't make sense. It was bad decisions. So. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. Again, this answer to this, other than somehow we have to get back to our moral foundations.
Yeah. The every generation has had its challenges that it had to navigate. Confusing times and circumstances that they had to navigate, and this just happens to be one of the myriad that our generation has to deal with. And to your point, anytime a group of people has to navigate those sorts of things, there has to be some kind of foundational core, fundamental principles that guide them in it, a North Star, so to speak, something that is constant, universal, and doesn't change, so that regardless of the scenario that any generation now or in the future finds itself in, the map still works. And I always think of, as military pilots, you and I both had to go through the helo dunker every couple of years. And some people like that, sadistic people like that. Other people, they dread it. From the time they finish it, they're already dreading the next one.
Yeah.
But that all came about because of an incident that happened. I believe it was in 2011, but I don't remember for sure, where a CH-46 was coming in to land on an LHD, snagged its left main landing gear on the netting around the deck. Do you remember this?
Yep.
And the pilot instantly knew something was wrong, but made the wrong decision to pull up on the collective. The wheel was snared in the netting, and so when he pulled up, it basically just flipped the aircraft over, and it fell into the water upside down, and everybody on board drowned because and when they found him, as I recall anyway, everybody was still in the aircraft, so nobody was able to find their way out. I may have some of those statistics wrong, but directionally that is true. Yeah. And so the military decided they needed to teach people how to escape, how to egress out of a downed aircraft, submerged in the water. And so that was the training. They created these helo dunkers. You would go, they would strap you in, they would dunk you to the bottom of the pool, they would flip you upside down, blindfolded, to simulate that this is going on in the dark, and you've got to find your way out before you run out of air. And the way they would teach you to do that, regardless of the orientation of the aircraft, right side up, upside down, dark, in the daylight, doesn't matter. You had to, before you unstrapped yourself from your seat, you had to put your hand on a reference point, something that was stationary in the aircraft that never moves. Because as soon as you release your belt, depending on the orientation of the aircraft, your body's going to float and do things. But as long as you have a hold of this reference point, you now are oriented to where the exit would be. And the little ditty that we memorized was, as soon as you hit the water, you knock the doors out, unhook all the cords, grab your reference point, and release your belt. Doors, cords, reference, belt, right? And in much the same way, I think our biblical foundation and our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, which are drawn heavily from biblical principles, those are our reference point, the thing that never moves. And so regardless of the chaos of the times, it's dark, we're upside down, suffocating amidst all the noise of everything that society is throwing at us, this reference point never moves, and you can always navigate your way out and back to the surface by having confidence in those things and making your decisions accordingly.
Yeah, you illustrated it perfectly, and again, I hope that there are people that are doing it, and frankly, a lot of podcasters are doing it. They're trying to get back to our values and articulate our values. There's a handful of congressmen that do it, not very many, but a handful. I really like Chip Roy. He's really good. Who's the Army Ranger guy with the beard? I can't think of his name. He's become a social media influencer. He's in Congress. Anyway, Charlie Kirk does a good job, of course, explaining our American values to a new generation in a new way. I think that is really important, including the faith aspect. And so, yeah, I hope that, it's a double-edged sword. You could focus on all the bad happening, but you can also focus on the good happening and the people that are trying to explain those values. And, churches getting more bold and pastors getting more bold and speaking the truth and teaching people the gospel and how we're supposed to be. And of course, the mainstream media or the regular media is not going to cover those kind of things. So it's happening more than we think, which I think is why the young Gen Z generation is turning more to faith and church, that kind of thing, because it is happening. Otherwise, they wouldn't be gravitating towards it. So,
yeah, they're looking for a reference point.
Exactly. Yep. I try to pull up, while you're talking, I was trying to pull up that video, and maybe I can find it before this podcast ends, just to show that video what you're talking about, because it's pretty eye-opening. I've seen it many times, like you said. The helicopter's trying to take off, and the back rear wheel, I think, gets caught on the net or something. The pilot's pulling up, and the pilot doesn't know why. Its orientation's going haywire and falls into the sea. It's pretty, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully you can find it. That'd be a good thing to watch.
Yeah.
Kind of shifting from the military to the civilian side of things, but in the civilian world, they're already starting to grapple with this concept of who do you hold accountable when AI makes a mistake. And I was reading an article recently about Tesla vehicles, all the lawsuits that have happened because of its autopilot. Tesla vehicles driven in autopilot or full service or full self-driving mode have been involved in far more accidents, including those resulted in at least 17 deaths and many serious injuries than previously recorded. And according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, 736 crashes since 2019 in the United States involved Tesla driven on autopilot. And so there's a law firm, Klein and Spector, that is prosecuting some of these cases. And so they're going after Tesla, the manufacturer, kind of going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, holding the manufacturer responsible for the choices that its autopilot program made in these traffic incidents. So we're already starting to grapple with this question of who do you hold responsible when a computer makes a bad decision?
Which is good.
Yeah,
I think that one of the dangers is the AI is moving so fast. Like if it was going slower, like most, generally speaking, technology in the last couple hundred years has been a gradual adoption. AI is going so fast. Hopefully that we can find a way to slow down and again, not be tempted by the fear of what our opponents are doing in other countries. And you mentioned Trump signed an executive order or something recently about the crux of that, I believe, was whether to keep AI centralized in two or three companies like OpenAI and Grok, and or to decentralize it. And I think that's what you're talking about. It's related to that, if I'm not mistaken. He chose to make it decentralized, which I think is healthy because it's again double-edged sword. But I don't. Again, with COVID, if you got government controlling, if there's only two or three, and of course government's going to control those two or three or heavily influence those two or three, now you have
government control.
Government controlling those things. Where if it's decentralized, I hope that it'll lead to more innovation. Obviously, I hope it'll lead to the AI that is produced. The ones that will break out to be the most effective will be the ones that are putting out the truth versus made up things, for example. So hopefully it'll lead to that and more truth and reality coming out of it.
Yeah, this goal of making America the AI capital of the world, obviously Trump is working to bring in investment, both domestically and foreign investment, into that goal. And of course, the infrastructure that comes along with AI is huge. So there's an economic boost to it for sure, but then there's on the development side of things has implications as well. We feel that maybe more than most here where I live in Prince William County in Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia, as I understand it, I think I heard it correctly, 70%? It's either 70% or 40%. I don't remember the stat, but either way, it's a lot. A large percentage of the world's internet activity flows through Northern Virginia.
Wow.
And it's data centers, right, which is a hot topic, especially here in Prince William County, because data centers have popped up in several locations. The developers are working on it. There's a lot of citizens who don't really care for it. There are people who, the county board of supervisors, they see dollar signs in terms of the tax revenue that they can get from these data centers, whereas a lot of the citizens of the county see them as eyesores, especially when they're being built encroaching on the Bull Run, Manassas battlefield, sitting on top of the Occoquan water table. The aesthetic, historical, and environmental impacts of these things, not to mention the huge power requirement that comes with it.
Yeah.
So there are so many second and third order effects that go into this decision of deciding that we are going to own AI.
Right.
All the moral and legislative decisions aside, it's a huge topic that's going to be talked about for decades.
Yep. I found the video that you're talking about with the CH-46. So to the audience who's not seen this, and to reinforce what Marcus is saying, when just keep in mind that when you're inside the CH-46, which you'll see in a second, you're a passenger in the cargo area there. You don't have any spatial orientation of what's happening outside the helicopter. It's a tube. Yes, there's some small windows, but you're not like looking out the window. You're looking inside the tube, and you don't really know what's happening outside the helicopter or the aircraft. The
And
pilots
there's only a
before.
handful of exits.
What's that?
There's only a handful of exits. There's the
Yep,
crew
only
door.
a handful of exits.
There's a window opposite, a ramp in the back, and then the 2 pilot doors pop out. So you've got to figure out a way to get to one of those places.
Yep. And I didn't mention this. I don't even know if I've told you this, but I used to be a crew chief when I was enlisted on CH-46.
Oh, really? Well, I was a CH-46 pilot before I transitioned to V-22.
Right.
So
yeah, for a very short time before I went officer, before I went to college. We had to get, we give a crew chief brief to the passengers. Hey, here are your exits, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, the average passenger who hasn't been through the helo dunker is just looking at it from the normal perspective. Like, we're level, the ground's below me. There's my window exit, there's my door exit, there's the ramp. So in their minds, at best, you're just thinking, okay, if we crash, I'm going to go out thinking the ground's below me or the water. But as you're describing, and we'll show here right now, the orientation can be completely different than that. And I'll show the video, and I guess you can just elaborate after I show it some more, because it'll make more sense to the folks here. Pull it up here. Let's see. Just say something funny or engaging while I'm doing this.
yeah, even for people who have gone through the dunker, it can still be a challenging thing. Like, you wouldn't think being upside down in the dark would be as disorienting as it is, but it is, and especially if you take away your ability to breathe.
Yes, that's the part. Yeah.
In that circumstance, you've got, even if you're a strong swimmer and you've spent time in the water, you've got maybe a minute. Like, how many people can hold their breath for 60 seconds?
Usually, actually not too bad. You can work up to that pretty easily, 1 minute.
Yeah.
And because you see the people ahead of you, and they're training you, and they show you the videos before you do the dunker, that you generally know you're not going to be out of breath for all that long. But when you're in it, and like you said, you don't know your orientation, you're strapped in a seat, you can't see your exit anymore. If you don't do it right, you don't get your anchors right, your heart rate starts racing, so the oxygen is now being used up by your brain and your organs, and even though you have even swimmers down there to get you out if you get stuck, the fear of losing your breath, to me, was I hated it.
And you got to time it too, because as soon as the aircraft impacts the water and the cabin starts to fill, the water level starts coming up your chest. You got to time that last breath.
Yeah.
And if you don't get a good breath of air before you submerge, now you're at a further disadvantage.
Yeah.
And of course, the aircraft isn't empty, because if you're carrying people in the back, it's usually combat loaded troops, right? So there's packs and rifles and all kinds of equipment that as soon as you hit the water and flip upside down, now that stuff is floating everywhere. The person in front of you panics. Legs and arms are flailing. You get kicked in the face.
Yeah.
And if the person, in front of you can't get the window open or the door open, you got a line of people waiting to get out, and we're all running out of air. And so it's an emotional event.
So I found it. I'll show the video now. I think this is the one you're talking about that started the whole thing. Yep. It's about 46 seconds.
I think just a warning to the viewers, I think there's at least one bad word in here, unless it's So he's coming in hot here. Yeah. Coming in on the 45. I think he's going to spot 7 or 9, right on the back of the LHD. That left main mount snags the netting. He pulls power.
Do it one more time. See right there.
And I want to say there were, was it 11 casualties? 11 people died in that incident. Yeah. So that was one of the major factors for instituting mandatory helo dunker training. And they've actually got some good videos of that online too. I don't know if you're able to find one, but
that's true. Yeah. So I'm assuming, and I was not a helo pilot. You were the pilot on that. So I'm guessing that it came down and landed. And normally he would land, and it doesn't have skids; it has wheels. So he would roll forward a little bit, and probably wasn't rolling forward. He couldn't figure out why, and then just kind of panicked and pulled up in the collective, or what happened?
Yeah, he never even had had his wheels on the deck. So on an LHD, there are 9 spots, and they're painted in what's called a crow's foot. So you've got a parallel or a perpendicular like L shape, and then there's a line going across the 45. And so when they come in to land on the deck, they're coming in and they're lining up on that 45-degree split on the crow's foot. They line up on that, and when they're over the deck, the crew chief will call them over the deck, and they'll pivot the nose to line up parallel to the deck. And then there's spots painted for their wheels, and they're supposed to put it right down in the paint. But that guy was coming in a little bit hot, and he flared coming in, and as he dipped to the left, he went wing down on the left, that left main mount never quite made it over the deck, and it snagged that netting off the side of the deck. And I think he realized something wasn't right, and your natural tendency is to wave off. That's what you do anytime there's a bad landing, right? And so when he went to pull power to wave off, it created a pivot point around that main mount that was stuck, and it just flipped him over.
Yeah, man, horrible. Yeah, I'd forgotten there was a lot of Marines on board. Yeah, that's
yeah.
They're sailors, Marines. I'm not sure.
I think it was 11. I think it was 11 people that were on board, if I recall, but may have been more.
So the illustration Mark has brought up is that, imagine if you're in that helicopter, it crashed. Let's just assume you're still alive, which they probably were. I think they were when they hit, most of them when they hit the water. But now you're upside down, strapped in a seat, and as soon as you start going down, it gets dark really fast, and you have 10 other bodies around you, flailing around, freaking out. You have your packs floating around, and back to the whole illustration of an anchor point, in life and everything, they teach you to grab an anchor point because your orientation's all messed up. And if you remember and practice before you took off what your anchor point is, and you reach and grab it, whether it's above you or below you or whatever, it helps your mind reorient to where you are in the aircraft and your orientation in the aircraft, which helps you then remember how to get to your exit, is the whole point. And that accident's the one that caused that training to happen. So now I think even all the infantry, like I remember when we did our MEU, we tried to get all our infantry troops through the helo dunker because we're going on a MEU and then we'd be on a helicopter.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's required for every MEU or was, but we tried to do every single one of them.
Yeah. It's good training. Challenging, I think. Even when it's getting ready to happen.
Yeah.
It's challenging. So you can only imagine in that instance, those guys in the back had no clue that was coming and probably had no idea what had just happened. All of a sudden, there's just an impact. Water starts flooding the cabin, and you've got seconds to figure out how to get out.
Yeah.
They have since now anytime you fly over water, whether you're a passenger or aircrew, you have they call it an LPU. It's basically just a horse collar that will inflate. But of course you don't want that to inflate while you're inside the aircraft underwater, because that makes it even harder to get out. But also in that is a habit bottle, a helicopter aircrew breathing device, which is like a small scuba tank, and it gives you a couple of minutes. So it improves your chances, and it's amazing. As soon as you go under, you can get your hands on that habit bottle and take a breath.
Right. Your heart rate slows down a little bit.
Yeah, you're like, okay.
Thinking clearly.
I still might die, but it won't be in the next minute.
Yeah. I remember I hated wearing that horse collar because it's like against your neck, you know, and it's uncomfortable. But man, if you don't have it and go down, you're gonna want it.
Yep. So anyway, I'm glad you were able to find that video. It kind of puts into context what we were talking.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So
I'm ready to wrap it up.
We live in chaotic times.
What's that?
We live in chaotic times, and without a reference point to guide you through, you're going to drown.
I think it's invaluable. I think, the last 5 years or so has really messed up those reference points that have made America what it is. Again, with all our flaws, we worked through it, but we've had a guiding light that we're always striving towards, and we've become a better nation over the decades and centuries. And when you start messing with that, with totally new philosophies that we know don't work and haven't worked around the world, but it sounds appealing, which is why it keeps coming up over and over again, because it does sound appealing. That's dangerous, man. So we need to, as a country and as churches and as parents and as leaders and men and women, harken back to those values and articulate them, you know. And that's one of the things we're trying to do here, is bring up these values over and over again in different ways, for ourselves and also for those who are listening to us. So hopefully, over time, we are somewhat effective at that.
Amen.
So I gotta get back to my real job here shortly.
Me too. Me too.
It was good, man. Good conversation. Enjoyed it. I'll get this.
Likewise.
Get this out soon, and again, I'm looking forward to getting our other co-hosts introduced here soon, and getting Pastor Mike back on, and just see where it goes. And I think you're it for the next topic.
All right.
Do us the favor, unlike John last time when he sprung the topic on us in the podcast.
Give you a heads up.
A couple days in advance, because I know you're going to be prepared for it with notes and quotes, and I got to do some research to be somewhat knowledgeable enough to talk about it.
Very good. Looking forward to it.
All right, man.
All right.
God bless.
God bless. Take care, brother.
Good to see you.
You too.